Exploring Healthier Masculinity Within Business, a monthly call for executive and senior leaders within industry who too rarely have a space to stop, to breathe, to take off the weight of being a leader of teams and organizations. Taking place on the first Monday of every month. Email garry.turner@radicality.co.uk. Hello and welcome to this next episode of In the Business of Healthy Masculinity. I will be introducing you to my new guest shortly, but before we get going, I just want to make you all aware of today being Tuesday, the 25th of November, 2025, as we're recording this wonderful conversation. It is also White Ribbon Day nationally here in the UK, which is whiteribbon.org.uk. I'm very pleased to be an ambassador for this charity. What do? They are a charity that is hell-bent on helping reduce men's violence against women and girls. Something that I'm very passionate about, someone that has a wife and two grown-up stepgirls. Of course, men also do find themselves on the end of abuse and harassment and other things on occasion, but it tends to be women are far more regularly impacted by these things, and that's why it's a focus on men's violence against women and girls. whiteribbon.org.uk. If you want to become an ambassador yourself, I invite you to do so. And here it is, over to my wonderful guest, and you are wonderful, Lewis Glynn. Welcome, Lewis, to the show. How are you, my friend?
Hello, good, thank you. How are you doing?
I am doing very well. All the better for having you here, because you are a very interesting character. Let my guests know a bit more about you, Lewis. Let them know who you are and what you're up to in the world.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I describe myself as nothing more than an average guy from Dartford. However, I say that I do have different hats that I wear at different parts in my life. So on the one hand, I work in higher education, looking after student experience up in London. So making sure, especially international students coming to London, have a great time, which these days we are facing a lot more tension on that front with the rise of certain more, let's call it divisive rhetorics, but we'll get into that later. On the other hand, I run a community choir in Dartford called the Dartford Township Choir, which for anyone listening from Dartford, I do recommend you join. For we are a community group that welcomes anyone, and anyone that says to me, but I can't sing, I will say, everyone can sing. It is just your vocal cords rubbing together. So trust me, everyone can sing. And the idea is coming together and just enjoying singing and enjoying being together, and nothing more than that. And the third and final hat I wear, which is ironic because I don't wear hats because of, the hair, is that I'm also chair of the Dartford Green Party, which is something that our wonderful host also did once upon a time. And on top of that, I do have my hidden, not so hidden ambitions of becoming elected and actually representing my community in some kind of political landscape. So yes, I'm your average multi-hatted guy from Dartford. Hello.
What a brilliant introduction. Thanks for that, Lewis. And when you think about the topic, like say, I love the fact you are working in an educational establishment, right? There's fees that have to be paid, you buy things, you sell things. Ultimately, you're in business as well. And you hear about the topic of healthy masculinity. I know that you and I share passion around sort of men's mental health, amongst other things. What comes up for you, or what's your sort of take or feeling or challenge around the topic of healthy masculinity? What does it mean to you as Lewis?
So I think I was thinking about this before I joined today, just because I wanted to give you as good an answer as I could. And I think for me, it all goes down to what we define masculinity as and what it means. And I think a lot of people would naturally, given the word, assume that masculinity is something associated with men specifically. Whereas for me, and feel free to challenge me on this, masculinity is a mindset that can be held by anyone. And so when I refer to masculinity, I'm talking about, let's call them more traditional, hierarchical, conservative mindsets of this is how things are done, power-based dynamics. I am better than you because I'm older than you. I've got a better job title, whatever it is. I'm going to talk down to you because I'm more important to you than you. And a lot of this, the reason I guess I link it to masculinity generally is because traditionally these roles, the power-based dynamics, were created, let's be honest, by men. But I also think within the working world, people can hold a very toxic masculinity approach to things, whether you're male, female, whatever it may be. So
Yeah.
I think for me, the concept and conversation around masculinity is actually around it as a mindset and kind of taking it away from just being a man or a woman or whatever it may be.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's really, really rich, actually. And you're sort of speaking to my perception of it, or my passion around this conversation is very much around. I was sort of pointing in a similar direction, I think, but let's prize it apart. Around we're all made up of masculine and feminine traits or energies, yeah. And fundamentally, we get the choice, actually, when we're conscious, of dialing up and dialing down those different traits in the moment. But we've been conditioned, as you beautifully state, by actually men over many, many generations and maybe millennia, where there's been a certain, and I love you point to the power dynamics. I think that's the part that isn't spoken enough about when we talk about healthy, unhealthy, men, women, etc. We're not talking about power. I think that's really, really important. And I'm curious, Lewis, when did you, can you share an experience of where you've come across that sort of, where did that power dynamic first come into your consciousness, I guess, in a way? Where, what was it? What was the context? Because it's not something that us men will automatically go to as a sort of differentiator.
It's a very interesting question, and I'd love to say there was a moment a few years ago. I was in a pub and I overheard it. No, this, and for some people this might be obvious, and this also might be more depressing for some, is that this is just the atmosphere and the society I've grown up in. So ever since I was younger, I was told, you should do this, don't do that. Why? Because I told you to. And that is in essence what the power dynamic is, which is, I am older than you, I'm your parent, I'm your teacher, you should listen to me. And a good story of this, actually. So I went to the wonderful Dartford Grammar School, which I will always plug, great school. I remember I was in sixth form, and when you get to sixth form, they loosen up the uniform rules. With it, as long as you wore a suit with a plain shirt and their tie, you were fine. And there was a rule in there about wearing striped shirts. And it wasn't a rule they made a big thing of, but when someone wore one, they said you shouldn't wear one again. And there was one time I wore a shirt that had very, very kind of faint stripes on. And one of the teachers came up to me and was like, you need to change out of that. You're not allowed stripy shirts. And I said, not in a combative, aggressive way. I was like, oh, why are we not allowed to wear shirts with stripes on? Not because I wanted to cause an argument. I was just interested in the reason why. Because it could be, oh, it's too similar to this, or it represents this, or whatever. And I was met with a response of, are you talking back to me? I was like, no, I'm really not. I'm just asking. And then this became me getting shouted at by a teacher. And then fast forward, I think it was 3 or 4 years, I then am working at the Mick Jagger Centre, which is the performing arts centre attached to Dartford Grammar School. And I bumped into that teacher again. And we were having a chatting away, whatever. And I said, do you remember the time I asked you about the stripy shirt thing? And we had a laugh about it and it was all good. And I said, now I'm not at school here. What is the answer to that question? Why can't you wear a stripy shirt? And he said, oh, there's no reason. It's just a power thing. We just like saying you're not allowed to because we said so. And that's what he said to me as a teacher, which is that because the grammar school is set for many people in this kind of traditional conservative mindset, is that here are the rules, you follow them, you don't question us. And that's what they are upholding. So it wasn't that stripy shirts clashed with the tie or was too similar to a uniform from down the road or whatever. It was just, it's the rules, you're going to listen to them. And so I think growing up with that, and then I guess going to university in London where you're open to different thoughts and different ways of thinking. I started going, is this really the way things are? Because people are often said, oh, that's just how it is. Yeah. And the how it is to me is the issue around traditional masculinity, is that it's been set up, and because there hasn't been a viable alternative, it's like, well, this is just how it is, get over it. And the get over it mindset is also where it comes from. So to go back to your original question, I've seen it throughout my life, and I see it to this day, whether it's at work or out on the street or whatever. It's just this kind of negative power thing of, why can't I do this? Because I told you so. Now sit down and shut up. That's the kind of approach. And I think over time I've gone, you know what, I don't like that. And it's okay to ask why, because the whole reason that humanity got to where it is we were, I don't know, sitting in a field many thousands of years ago. And it's like, how come I'm eating this raw meat, but why can't I eat it another way? Why don't we try heating it over this fire thing we've just invented? If we went back then, no, that's not how we do things, how dare you, we would still be in that field, hunter-gathering, whatever. So I feel like not questioning stuff and not pushing things forward goes against the basis of what humanity is. He said, answering a simple question with a very big statement.
Beautiful. No, really, so many things have popped up for me, Lewis, as you've shared that. One, I've never heard a teacher be so explicit about the fact that that's why we do it, because I've got power, you haven't, therefore like it or lump it. Like, fascinating. Like, talk about overt. And I think the other thing that I was picking up on as well was, I don't always go here on this platform, but I think it's really relevant what you're sharing, is that sort of systemic piece, which is, I don't know why I went there, but I'm thinking about like the enclosure movement and actually, colonization, and actually all of that's been allowed to happen off the basis of, you will do what we tell you to do, whether we do it with a gun, a blade, a boat, the old Silk Road, whatever the mechanism is, there has been a mechanism of, we have power, you don't.
Yeah.
And I think, it seems like, really sort of micro, like to your school in Dartford, to the macros like colonization, like those things, they're not far from each other. And I guess that's what I'm holding in this moment as we're talking, is if we're not aware of where we're dialing up and dialing down this power, whether it's healthy masculine, unhealthy feminine, whatever, if we're not conscious of power, then it's very easy for it to become abuse, I feel. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
Or how would you sort of build or challenge on that?
Yeah, so I think I'm building, not challenging. Don't worry.
You're welcome to challenge.
Well, no, I will when you say something that I don't agree with. But no, I think, yes, the thing with power is I mean, there's that phrase about that power corrupts, in that it's easy to say, and I'm sure everyone said it at some point, even, the most powerful male CEOs that are accused of all kind of things, that when they were younger, they're like, I will never be like that, because I'm looking at this from my detached perspective, because I don't have X, Y, and Z privilege or whatever it is. And then you get into a position where, even low down in, I don't know, big X corporation, whatever it may be, and you suddenly get someone telling you, oh, you know what, if you go about it that way, you get more money. And if you talk down to that person in front of that person, you'll get promoted. And then you start realizing this is quite a comfortable way of doing stuff. I mean, take, for example, within politics, there's always a movement from opposition parties who are not, if we take the UK, one of the two main parties for proportional representation.
Yeah.
It's a word I say a lot and I can't say. Is when someone's in opposition, or you're not one of the two main parties, you're sat there going, we should have proportional representation. It's going to be better for society. It's fairer for everyone. Everyone's vote counts. It's more accurate of the polling across the country. And then you get voted in with some kind of large majority, and someone says, so you're going to go ahead with proportional representation? You're like, well, here's the thing. Here are all these reasons why we shouldn't, which is all spin, because the reason is, now you're benefiting from that bias of the old system. Why would you want to change it? And that's where the issue comes in, is to be able to, in some cases, not all, change a system, you have to be within the system. But if you start benefiting from the system, it is the human condition to go, this is quite nice though. And I think this is where it's difficult, because the human brain and the human body likes to be comfortable. Yes, we like to be challenged on stuff, but if you're in a comfortable situation, and you personally, maybe your immediate circle is comfortable, and then someone says, but I thought you were sticking up for us. Our houses are still on fire. And you're like, but mine's fine. And I think this is where the issue comes in, is that when people are introduced within the sphere of the power that I usually criticize, you then start finding yourself going, oh, it's not that bad though. And so I'm going to sit here and tell you that I don't want to become one of those people that holds a position of power and abuses it. But I've never had one of those positions of power. So I'm going to be honest and say, I don't know how I would handle it. I know how I think I would handle it, but until I'm surrounded by the benefits of it, you do never know. And I think these are the open conversations people don't have, because it's okay to be like, I don't know how I'd react in the situation. Whereas others, especially in politics, you have to say, this is what I'd do. This is how I'm going to do it, even if you're not telling the truth. So I think, again, it's all about open conversations and people being honest with the situation they're in. But of course, the challenge to that is you don't want to expose the system that you're benefiting from. I've gone around your question, but I hope that makes sense.
Oh, no, it's you've passed it apart really nicely, actually, to be honest. And before I respond, I just want to make everyone that's listening and maybe not watching us, LinkedIn/Lewis-Glynn, Glynn. Go check out Lewis. You'll find all his details in the show notes, but do go and give him a follow. So you mentioned earlier on that, yes, I've previously been chair of Dartford Green Party. We know each other through that. We're both Dartfordians. We're both part of Dartford Green Party. But we're here in this conversation today because, like I say, we wear multiple hats. We're comfortable with being uncomfortable by navigating multiple hats and challenges. And I think what's interesting about the point you just made, Lewis, for me, let's keep it political for a second because it's really relevant, is, we've had a landslide reform basically party takeover, right? Kent County Council at a county level. And I've been really holding this interesting tension around the world rightly challenging where they muck up and where they maybe make a load of false truths or making up a load of spin, absolutely challenge that. And holding also the tension, trying to be healthy and being objective but if we got in wholesale with 6 Kent County councillors overnight and didn't actually have them, we'd be in a very similar situation around not knowing how it all works, and actually we wouldn't know how all of these different groups work and how all these different committees operate, etc. So we'd also have to learn. But then it becomes about the how. How do we go about doing it? Do we do it with transparency, with honesty, through listening, through vulnerability, through saying I don't have all the answers and actually can I learn from you? Or do we go in, as you say, with that unhealthy side and go, I know it doesn't matter. I don't need to understand it because I know it all already. Totally fine. And you really sort of sparked that in me. That's I've been really holding. I'm not even discussed it with you. I've been really holding on to that topic around if we had got in wholesale as like the local Greens on county council in our context, we would have been going through a very similar journey. But I just know we would have done it very differently.
Yeah, and I think also going from that, it's to link back to your original question about what is healthy masculinity, is because it's easy to say, and I'm going to stick within politics because this is the thing that it's the easiest example, because people, I think you bring out the worst in people when you give them positions of power in politics, is as you say, it's easy to criticize others who come in and get taken in, swept up by stuff. And then also everyone in politics says we need to hold X to account. We're going to be honest. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. And then fast forward to an interview on the BBC and they say, yes or no, would you abolish this? And they say everything possible except the words yes or no, because they're too scared of the response to that. Because whether you say yes or no, you're going to get a bad reaction by someone. And that's why I think a lot of people, based on, I think there are over 175,000 members in the Green Party now, have been taken in by what Zach Polanski's doing, is because he's going around and they say, do you believe this, yes or no? And he says, yes, and here's why. And he's someone that when they confront him with all his all the criticisms and conspiracies around his past, all this story, we've exposed you. He's like, sure, let's talk about it. It's that openness to actually have a conversation that I think is quite refreshing. And I think to me, that's what healthy masculinity or a healthy society is, which is, and also to be like on TV, you know what? I made a mistake. We made a decision and it didn't go as well. And we're sorry about that. And of course, the big risk in politics is that you say that and everyone goes, see, look how terrible they are. But then also, I think a lot of people, and it's hard to say this because until it happens, you don't know. A lot of people would go, I respect their honesty. Because in life, if you make a mistake and own up to it and say, sorry, I tried, people understand. And so I think after a while, the more politicians do it, because they are seen as role models in many ways, same with celebrities or influencers or whatever, the more they start doing these things, the more society starts kind of catching on to it. But I think honesty and openness is something that we're very much missing, because it's easier to protect your own view and attack other people. And I think instead of opening yourself up to potential criticism and having that conversation where you're like, you know what, I made an error, most people just choose the no, it's actually nothing to do with me, it's that guy over there, it's those immigrants in those boats, it's the X, Y, or Z. It's not our fault, it's their fault, and it's the othering of people, which I think is the basis of what toxic masculinity is not accepting responsibility and going, oh, it's this other group that we can just blame who are below us in some way, whether it's in your company, in your society. So yes, honesty and openness is the way forward, I think.
You know, it's really interesting. I love how you're keeping it on the politics side. I'm loving keeping it real there. But the ease with which you can translate this over into business. You know, I work in a big business context, right? You know, major part being a 5 billion turnover company, 5,000 employees. I do stuff alongside that as well. But one of the misnomers, and I'd love to sort of discuss this with you, Lewis. In many business contexts, an unhealthy approach to business, in my opinion, my humble opinion, is where I hear senior and executive leaders saying, our business isn't political. Even though business has absolutely direct links in every parts of supply chains, whether it's lobbying, whether it's supply chains where you buy raw materials from, it is inextricably linked, politics and business. But there's this very interesting thing around, again, wanting to stay, and I empathize, wanting to stay comfortable and not have the difficult conversation around the fact that actually business is inherently political, but we just don't want to acknowledge it in the public domain. And it's so I find that quite an interesting
and I think
anomaly.
this reminds me of probably, and I wish I could find this one day, it was one of my favorite TV adverts I have ever seen. I think it was maybe the late 90s, early 2000s. It's these two guys in a pub, and this one, I think they bring some drinks over, and one guy says, oh, did you see the thing the Prime Minister said the other day? And the other guy went, I don't talk politics. And then it keeps flashing forward to other points in the evening where a guy says, oh, can't believe that the local blah blah closed. He's like, no, that's politics, we can't talk about that. And everything he tried talking about, the guy was like, no, we can't talk about that, that's actually political. And I even see it with people at work, because everyone at work knows if you say anything political around me, my ears prick up and I am in the conversation. Even if I'm not trying to convince people of my view, I enjoy the conversations with people. But then you see people go, I just don't really do politics, because they think politics is the big P politics. So what's going on in Labour, Tory, Reform, Greens, whatever. But then fast forward to another meeting and they're like, oh, I can't believe the CEO did that. It's like they're not taking our well-being into account when they made this strategic decision. And I said, I thought you didn't do politics. They're like, it's not. I'm like, this is exactly the same thing on a much smaller scale. And everything that I do when I'm not here within the local Green Party or whatever it is just that on a Dartford scale. And it's what the national parties do for the country. But I think it's also around reframing and the choice of words and narrative, because in the same way that when I said masculinity isn't tied to being male, but the problem is you say masculinity and people are like, oh, that must be a male thing. And even, oh, this is political, this is tied to politics. If you use a different phrase, people can say and think exactly the same thing, but not have that, oh no, I'm not political, if you just reframe it as something completely different. I mean, take, for example, people of my parents' generation, to them, discussions around mental health and kind of anything around that, you just didn't do it. You were just told you were weird, or you had problems, or you were hyperactive, or whatever it may be. And so you say, oh, maybe, I mean, you maybe meet someone and you can see that it would benefit them to talk to someone, or they might be having some kind of mental health problem. And they're like, no, like I don't do any of that silly mental health stuff. But I noticed in some people's cases, if you reframe it and talk about, I believe it's called the black dog on the shoulder, which is, I think it's something that Churchill said in World War II, i.e.
Right.
black dog on the shoulder of Europe or something, is that if you reframe it like that and talk about the black dog on someone's shoulder, suddenly they open up in exactly the same way as if you said, let's have a counseling session or let's talk about your mental health. And so sometimes it's about adjusting your narrative and your words to the people you're talking to so they actually understand it, which is why I think people say, I don't talk politics here, is because politics and even big corporate companies, or even where I work, which is not particularly big as a company, those in charge use the big words that most people don't understand. And then people are going, oh, they must be important. They're using the big words. And then when they reframe it as, oh, what this actually says is, we're going to make loads of budget cuts to your department, or I believe, as they would say, workplace efficiencies. People are like, oh, now I know what it is you're actually doing. So by actually spelling it out in plain, simple words, more people are brought into the conversation. And I think another trait, again, this is all coming out as I talk to you. Another
Love
trait,
it.
unhealthy or toxic masculinity, is to exclude people from conversations by using, whether it's big words or just literally not bringing them into the conversation or whatever it is. And so one of the things I do, whether it's at work talking to students or in the Green Party or Dartford Township Choir, is I want people to read what I write or hear me in a way that everyone can go, I know what he's talking about. And so for me, when I write stuff down, send it, whether it's emails or writing stuff for various places, I want to write like I'm sat with you in a cafe or a pub having a conversation with you. In the same way that when you're at the pub, you don't talk about, as I said, workplace efficiencies and let's circle back to this. You're like, did you hear that annoying thing someone said the other day? Can you believe they did that? Which is that more local conversational thing. But by that, you're including everyone in the conversation. And through that kind of community-based open conversation, things can change, which I think is probably why a lot of places don't do it, because you don't want to bring in the change because you want to preserve what's already there. I've gone on a tangent again. I can't even remember what the question was.
Not really, because you've actually circled back to power dynamics, I think, in many ways. So I think it's actually quite a nice little segue. And what I want to do, because time is fleeting, I would love for you to talk a bit about, very much in the spirit of healthy masculine. What's some of the work you're doing? I know you've got a project that you're working on, I believe, where you're looking to try and help with men's mental health. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yes. So for me, I've struggled with my mental health quite a lot. And I remember when I was younger, when I was going through this stuff, a lot of people telling me I was like, I'm suffering with, I think they've called it depression. And people are like, oh, have you tried cheering up? Thank you. Never thought of that before, because that was the approach of the time back then. And so I've suffered through various mental health issues, whatever it is. And I've been through various forms of counseling, therapy. I've gone through it all. And so as a result, I've become a lot more in touch with kind of my mental health, just because I've suffered with it, in the same way that if you've suffered with a physical health problem, I don't know, if you've had irritable bowel syndrome, you're more aware of your stomach. It's the same thing. Because I've had that, I'm more aware of it. And I start seeing it that people don't want to have those conversations because it goes against the mindsets of what masculinity is. And it's all about being the hard man or being the strict, this is how it is, kind of thing. But if you actually look at where that's come from their experience as a child, being told this is how men are meant to be, or this is how people are meant to be, or being introduced to these things where you're introduced to a system where it benefits you to act a certain way. And if you do something for long enough, that becomes a learned trait, and that's just what you do, which is how humans go about everything, really. And so that's what led me to think about, when it comes to mental health and the extremes of mental health, which is male suicide, which I know is something you care a lot about as well, which is one of the biggest killers of men under 50, I think, which it's one of those things also to talk about unhealthy masculinity, is that you bring this up and you say, let's talk about men's mental health. And you get a lot of other people going, ugh, it's all about men as usual. And this is where I get it, and it's slightly more difficult. But I think it is men being angry and having a lot of anger and not knowing what to do with it that has brought us to a situation where Donald Trump is elected mostly off of younger men. You've got reform in the UK, lots of young, angry men who are angry at society, immigration, whatever it is. And it's all because I think personally, they don't always know how to express certain emotions, or when they're challenged with it, they shut down because they don't know how to say what they want to say, which is not a criticism, because I, for a long time, was the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been working on a project called Real Men Do Cry, which is obviously a take on Real Men Don't Cry, obviously.
Nice.
And the idea behind that is just open conversations around just what it is to be a man and what emotions are and how it works. And I'm a big fan of subtle ways of doing it. So, and this all started because of the hoodie that I'm wearing, which you can see, which a lot of people, if you're watching this online, or if you're listening, I'll tell you, it's one of those mental health hoodies that says, "You are enough" on the front. And on the back, it says, "Dear person behind me, the world is better with you in it. Love me," or something like that, which is a way for people to, and if you're on a train, you're in the street, people can see it, and you're not in their face saying, "We need to talk about your mental health." It's more, that's quite a nice thing to say. And the amount of people that have come up to me or pulled their cars over, and in Dartford, when someone pulls a car over and rolls their window down, I'm normally a little bit put off. But I've had people roll their windows down and be like, "That was really nice reading that," or "Love you, buddy," or whatever it is. And I've seen a lot of dads driving with their kids in the car saying that. And I think they're the kind of things, it sparks thoughts in the children's heads of, "Oh, look, I saw daddy saying that nice thing to that guy on the street." And maybe it isn't a case of discipline through getting angry or violence or whatever it is.
Beautiful.
And it's essentially about the start of subtle conversations without getting in people's faces. In the same way that if you want to convince someone of your view on politics or whatever it is, if you say, "Here is the reasons why you're wrong, and if you don't believe me, you're a terrible person," they're not going to believe you. If you let them do the talking and come to you with their questions, and then you respond really by listening to them, which is a skill that many people just don't have anymore, sadly, and just responding with, "Why is it you think that? Have you maybe thought about this?" You end up finding a lot more common ground than you would have thought there was. And that's where I think the trick for this thing lies, is around finding common ground with people, and then over time, that idea that talking about yourself and your feelings is actually completely fine.
Yes, looking forward to all the merch coming out, Lewis.
Forward. Real Men Do Cry is
it.
coming out soon. Watch it on a hoodie in Dartford soon.
Looking forward to it. Look, Lewis, you've been amazing. Thank you so much for being a guest today. I want to remind everybody listening or watching, LinkedIn/in/Lewis-Glynn, GLYNN. I'm got a little bit of a coughing fit. I do apologise. And then I'm going to do one little naughty thing, which I have not done on any other episode. Join.greenparty1word.org.uk. I promise this isn't a political broadcast, although we will talk a lot of politics on this platform. And as we're both members of Greens, why not? Last word to you, Lewis. Last word to you. Any final thoughts or reflections for the viewers or listeners as we go off?
You know what? Yes. And I know you said it's not a political broadcast, but I am going to say it's the slogan I keep hearing of "Let's make hope normal again." And to me, hope is being open, having conversations, and just listening to people. And so I will end it with the 3-word slogan that I ran on when I was standing as a Green candidate in Dartford, which is community, conversation, and transformation. Because if we live our lives based on bringing everyone with you, having conversations instead of talking at people, and using both of those things to improve things, society can only get better. It should be that simple.
That is the last word, according to Lewis Glynn. Beautiful conversation. Thank you, my friend. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you. See you later.